Western oil companies know this, but it's deliberately suppressed because we need to maintain the myth that oil is a finite resource so that people are prepared to pay outrageous sums of money for it. So consider what the reality is in terms of the real reserves off the coast of Ireland. I mean, we're not talking a few trillion here, or as in the Shell see on these excellent notes, where they're very conservatively estimated 540 billion. You know, we're not looking at 540 billion or even 5 trillion under the proper management. There's resources here for multiple generations. In reality, there's another factor to all this, of course, because we don't need to be using hydrocarbons at all. Because the alternative technologies already exist. Who do you think owns the patents for all the alternative technologies? The oil companies. And just in case that you think that we're still struggling to develop a viable electric car, Henry Ford was instructed by John D. Rockefeller to stop building the electric car in 1896. In 1895, there were 2,000 registered vehicles in New York. 1,800 of them were electric. The Rockefellers bought up all the electric tramways all around the states of the US in the early part of the 20th century, between the wars basically. And the reason they bought up the electric tramways was so that the commuting network of suburbia was effectively wiped out, and the whole idea was to encourage people to buy the horseless carriage so they could sell oil. We live in a hydrocarbon-driven economy. It's an absolutely critical part of the globalist agenda of the economy. So Ireland's sitting on this really important cusp, and I would hazard a guess that there really isn't a politician right now in the Irish government that has sufficient knowledge or awareness to appreciate the magnitude of the resources sitting here, or the magnitude of the responsibility on their shoulders in terms of future generations of people in this country. And this hypothesis, by the way, of abiotic oil was popularised in the West by this guy, Thomas Gold. But the first clue that he may have actually been onto something was the fact that he was demonised. He was targeting anybody who is demonised in the media. That should be your first clue to go take a good look at what they're really saying. Right? I'm not suggesting that they're always right. Maybe some people do need to be demonised, but anybody that is demonised, anybody that is dismissed as completely wacko and having outrageous theories, go take a look for yourself. The role of the mainstream media is to control the narrative. It's to control your belief system. Hopefully what I'm doing is quite the opposite. I mean, because I don't want you to take anything I say at face value, and I know most of you won't. I simply sow seeds, and I'm just simply trying to sow some seeds of curiosity so that you'll go check this out for yourself, and then you'll go find the people that you need to speak to actually raise some awareness of this issue. But Thomas Gold, one of the reasons he was demonised was because they said, well, he's plagiarised some of these Russian academic papers, and he hasn't given credit where credit was due. What they didn't say was he's wrong. In their demonisation, they didn't dare say he was wrong. So they demonised him by accusing him of plagiarism. So the whole hypothesis behind abiotic oil is that oil is a naturally generating fluid, deep from within the bowels of the earth, and that it percolates its way up through deep reservoir systems. And oil has been gifted to humanity for millennia. But of course, up until the late 19th century, people just took the oil that oozed out of the surface. It was in the late 19th century that we started actually drilling in and sucking it out. And of course, we're just going deeper and deeper and deeper until we end up with a mess like on the BP Deepwater Horizon. But in addition to the oil, because I've just focused on the hydrocarbons, but it's not just the hydrocarbons, it's every other resource in Ireland. And, you know, there's an Irish visionary that I want to draw your attention to. Some of you may have heard of this guy, but those of you that haven't, I strongly recommend that you go and take a look at this guy's work. Because like all visionaries, he was revered in every country where he worked, except his home country, where he was demonised. And, you know, one of this guy's greatest achievements was actually getting the law changed so that the Irish people had the opportunity to have a referendum on their participation in the EU. Now, how many referenda have the Irish people had with regards to their membership of the European Union?
Some of them we've had twice.
Some you've had twice. How many referenda in total?
4 or 5.
It's three. It's three. And the reason that you have that is because of this guy, Raymond Crotty, a Kilkenny farmer, who realised that the common agricultural policy of the European Union, or European Economic Community as it was then, was destroying Irish farming. And he could see that the common agricultural policy, extrapolated into the future, would turn Ireland into an arable wasteland. He went to college and studied agricultural economics. And he wrote a number of books, which I'll show you in a second. But then he realised that the signing of the Single European Act into law in 1986 was totally against the Irish Constitution, because it was the Irish government handing the power over to a foreign entity, i.e. the European Economic Community. So he took the Irish government to court in December of 1986, and initially he thought he'd lost the ruling. He thought he was bankrupt. But his legal team spotted that there was a problem, a flaw in the summation, and so they launched an appeal. And he went all the way through the legal process until in April of 1987 the Supreme Court of Ireland ruled that it was indeed unconstitutional for any Irish government to hand power over to a foreign entity without getting sanction from the people via a referendum. So the first referendum on Ireland's membership of of signing power over to Brussels was in May of 1987. The other two are obviously much more recent. This guy's a hero. This guy was a true visionary. He could see that the process of gradualism was multi-pronged by the bureaucrats and bureaucrats of the EU and by the globalist financial banksters. You can see what's happening. He wrote about it. This is just some of his books. He wrote about it. Nobody in Ireland wanted to take him seriously. So he went and actually provided consultancy to many countries, many nations in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. And tragically, he died in 1994, 95. But I encourage you to go take a look at Raymond Crotty's works, because, you know, whilst he may not provide the perfect template for how this could go forward in a different paradigm, nonetheless, you know, his thoughts definitely need to be taken into account. I said at the start of the presentation I would show you how these guys take great delight in rubbing everybody's noses in it and telling people what they're doing, and then when there's no reaction, just ploughing on with their agenda. That's a picture from the Daily Mail back in November of last year. A drunken premier playing right into the hands of the EU. Well, I've shown that picture, but this is from the full article. And there's a paragraph here which is very, very significant. Because here was the statement of intent. It says, but here is the worst of it. The EU chiefs not only think that Ireland's crisis will turn into a national death spiral, they may be secretly hoping it will. Brussels knows that the further Ireland and other troubled Eurozone countries sink into financial disaster, the greater the excuse the bureaucrats can find to achieve one of the long-standing ambitions, to take control of national budgets. And of course, once you've lost control of the national budgets, you have no control. And you have no possibility of clawing back your national sovereignty. And this is the headline that had people high-fiving in Brussels, the man who's now running Ireland, in the Irish Daily Mail. And there was no reaction at all. 40 years of fluoride in the water is pretty damn powerful, huh? Would that have been the reaction in 1916, 1922? Well, fortunately, there is one Irishman alive. He doesn't actually live in Ireland right now, but there is one Irishman alive who has become a hero to the expatriate Irish community. Of course, many of them should actually come home and, you know, give you a hand to get your country back. But this guy is an absolute hero, and I'm just going to show you a short clip from an interview that got him the fame he perhaps deserved. Hopefully we have some sound.
I'm Jason Calabry with Financial News, and today we're talking to a real Irishman and someone in the money business about what's going on in Ireland with the Celtic Tiger and the banks are hurting so much, the downfall. What's the story here?
You really want to know?
I'd love to know.
I'll tell you, it's like what has happened all over the Western world for the last 20 or 30 years. Greed, and more fucking greed, and cheap money. And in Ireland, it's a tragedy what happened to the Tiger. We have, I'd say, 4 causes. We had a stupid fucking government. We had a regulator who was asleep at the wheel. We had very deceitful and conniving and corrupt developers. And of course, above all, wanking fucking bankers. Wanking bankers. We had these arseholes that for the last 20, 30 years are getting these massive bonuses, these employees and directors of banks, on the misfortune of the working class, and getting these huge bonuses and salaries. But you know, if you and all these arseholes should be thrown in jail and the keys thrown away for the rest of their life. And you know, sir, if you went in and you're unemployed and you wanted to take a loaf of bread out of it, a store or a supermarket to feed your family, guess what? You'll be up in court for it. These assholes are living all over the world now on the backs of the misfortunate working people. And who's going to pay for all this? We've mortgaged the next generation or two. Who's going to pay for it? The working men. We got the labourer, the small farmer, the fisherman, the nurse, the teacher, the policeman, the fireman, the plumber, the carpenter. Fuck's sake, man, this is a joke.
So I'm sensing a wee bit of discontent?
You are indeed, sir. And by the way, let's not be too cocky in this part of the world, North America either. All these debts that people have accumulated over the last 30 years, everybody gets their day in the sunshine.
And you know, speaking of the Celtic Tiger and all that you mentioned, you know that Michael Flatley is really from Chicago, but that's another story.
Fuck off!
Don't you hate it when people hold back and won't tell you what they really think? You know, imagine if that was the reaction en masse, and people were as incensed as that, then there would be change, there would be social change. But you know, the social change, unfortunately, like any social change, any time in history, has to be driven by the middle classes. Because the working classes are always ready to bring about social change, because they're the ones that have been downtrodden for much longer. But it's when the middle classes realise that they are getting screwed in one way, shape or form, that's when things start to happen.